The gauge horizontal gadget is used to display the value of an analog property, such as the present value of an analog input or analog value. There is also a gauge vertical gadget. I'll add both of them here. Since they are virtually identical other than the orientation, we'll concentrate on the gauge horizontal. It has two main tabs of settings, along with some of the standard tabs. There are quite a few settings, but most of them are cosmetic. In many cases, only the scale needs to be changed to fit a given situation. The major steps property might also need change to make the numbers increment in multiples of 5 or 10, or some other appropriate value. I'll undo these changes and stick with a scale of 0 to 100 for now. Starting with the Gauge tab, the first setting is the gauge position. This sets the gauge to be above or below the caption. The height percent sets the height of the gauge in a percent of the height of the gadget. The rest of the space is dedicated to the caption. This is useful if the caption font is large or contains multiple lines of text. The fill position sets where the fill area of the gauge is relative to the scale. It can be either on top of or below the scale, as well as centered, which places the scale over the fill area. Several fill styles are available. As we've already seen, the gradient fill style displays as a continuous bar that slowly changes from the low to normal to the high color as a gradient. The color segments fill style displays the different range areas as distinct areas, with a sharp contrast between them. The active color fill style will fill the entire bar with the current range color. The bar is red because the current value is above the high limit. It would be yellow if the value was below the low limit, and green otherwise. The next fill style is round LEDs. This will fill the area with as many LEDs as will fit, given the height of the fill area, and maintaining a round aspect ratio. To get more LEDs, make the fill area smaller vertically. Notice that with so few LEDs, their colors are an approximation of where the range changes. The last fill style is rectangle LEDs. This works just as the round LEDs, and the same rules apply to the number of LEDs and their colors. The color of each range can be changed, and the position of the gauge within the gadget bounds fine-tuned. We've already covered the minimum and maximum values, so let's go over the steps and ticks. There will always be one more number on the scale than the number of major steps. Changing the major steps directly changes the increment between the numbers. The minor ticks are the smaller tick marks between the major ticks. There will be one less minor tick than the number of minor steps. The tick length sets the length of the major ticks. The minor ticks will always be half as long as the major ticks. The color of both the major and minor ticks can be changed. And the decimal places sets how many decimal places will be displayed in the scale numbers. This can make the gauge look crowded. Making the font smaller or having less major steps can help with this. The SliderHorizontal gadget is used to modify the value of an analog property, such as the present value of an analog output or analog value object. There is also a slider vertical gadget, but it is virtually identical to the horizontal version, so we will concentrate on the horizontal. Everything shown applies to both gadgets. The slider has several standard settings tabs along with slider and scale tabs. We'll start with the slider tab. The control position sets the position of the slider either above or below the caption. The height percent sets the height of the slider as a percentage of the gadget's height. The rest of the space is dedicated to the caption. This may need changed if the caption has multiple lines of text. The thumb position sets the thumb of the slider to be above or below the scale, while the thumb size changes its size. Note that making this too small may make it hard for the user to click and drag it properly. The color of the thumb can be changed, as well as the color of the indicator line. The range style controls the look of the range markers if they are enabled. I'll undo these changes and then set it up to use a range with a color gradient on the scale. We need to supply a low and high limit for the range. I'll use 25 and 75. Now we have a smooth gradient going from the low color to normal, then the high color. The other option is color segments, which uses distinct sections for each range marker. The round to nearest setting controls the increment of the value as the slider is dragged. Note that the value now changes by 1 rather than by 0.5. The smaller this number is, the harder it can be to select the exact value desired. Each of the range colors can be enabled or disabled, but only when using the color segments style. The position of the slider can be fine-tuned using the X and Y offset settings. The minimum and maximum values set the allowable values for the slider. The major steps setting directly affects the increment between numbers on the scale. The number of major ticks will always be 1 greater than this number. Minor ticks are the smaller ticks between each major tick. The number of minor ticks will always be 1 less than the number of minor steps. The tick length sets the length of the major ticks. The minor ticks will always be half the length of the major ticks. The color of both the major and minor ticks may be changed. The decimal places setting controls how many decimal places are shown on the scale. Setting this to more than 0 may require a smaller font, less major steps, or making the slider larger.